forgot, but right before I took this to the bandsaw, I went ahead and cut the ends off to length with the pattern while I still had a square block to put against my miter saw fence. That would have been really hard to do with that rounded side. I'd have had to done a lot more handwork. So this is almost a finished surface off that power miter saw. Got a really sharp blade on there.
I left my home in the Georgia pine. I needed to work.
It's a pretty fair curve. You wouldn't be able to do that very easily with a sander.
I didn't care what kind. My trouble starts when the whistle blows. It's a sad goodbye.
Well, I finally broke down and sharpened my scraper. It's working a lot better now. I had to take my part out of the vise because my burnisher that I used for my scraper is also doubles as the pin in the parallel guide in my leg vise.
We're down and home. 12 tons of gold on a big iron sled. I work all day for a gold hard bed. Now heaven knows.
I've cut a small piece out of my main board and I'm going to lay out 2 wedges on it because it's thick enough. Save a little lumber. So I'll lay those out and cut them apart, and I'll have one for the jack plane and for the smoother. I haven't decided yet on the joiner plane if I'm going with a 2-inch wide blade or if I'll go a little wider, so I'm not going to cut it yet. And here's a pair of roughed out wedges ready to start the handwork. I flattened the back of the wedge on the 100 grit sandpaper on my surface plate. It was pretty true to begin with, but this way I'm sure. I left it a little wide, so if I get some tear out on the back edge here, it won't be a problem. I can cut that off. I've got a pretty good fit on the wedge right now. I don't know if you can see this on camera very well, but all the way along the abutment here, it's nice and tight on both sides. When I try and move the blade back and forth, it is just rigid. It doesn't slip or slide, so I know I've got it tight on both abutments. And on the bottom, you can see it there or not, I'm about probably a 1/16 of an inch. The tip of the wedge is about a 1/16 from the sole of the plane. It's right up to the edge of the abutments and about the right length, and everything's square. So now it's time to start shaping the rest of the wedge. Up to this point, I've only worked on the underside of the wedge and the top of this part from here down to the tip. Now it's time, I'll go ahead and start working on this insert here and rounding this off and maybe undercut it a little bit more on the bottom. And then I'll go ahead and cut out the insides of it here.
My daughter's voice, that mountain home, look when I wake, I'm all alone. 12 tons of gold on a big iron sled. I work all day for a gold hard bed. Now heaven knows where heaven lies. There ain't no gold in Tennessee mine.
Before I chamfer the corners and the ends, I'm going to go ahead and mark out the location of my strike button, and that's where I'll use my Forstner bit to come in and cut that 7/8 diameter hole. Okay, I've marked off the midpoint of this height. This height's right about 2.5 inches. So I've taken a 3/16 file. It's a chainsaw file. It's a real fine tooth file, so it's easy to start and keep on track and not tear anything up. And I'll use that to give myself a starting point, and then I'll go to a larger diameter file that's a little more aggressive and try to get the depth I want. And then I'll take a chisel and start at the top and just start chamfering down to that, and then I'll use a scraper to clean the whole thing up and try to get one continuous smooth surface. Now I'll start with that and start chiseling down, and I'll adjust it as I go.
The company man, he wants my soul. It ain't enough, everything I owe. Now when I die, my grave will fill with the Tennessee miner from the Georgia hills.
And once I get close, I'm going to take a file and kind of touch it up. And then go to the card scraper to get rid of any fuzziness the file left.
On a big iron sled, I work all day for a cold hard bed. Now heaven knows where heaven lies.
Get a nice crisp clean end grain on that corner. Now that I've got the corners chamfered on the front and the back, it's time to start chamfering around the top edge and kind of blending those in. Okay, and from here on in it's pretty much going to be just blending it in by hand. I've been working on this corner here with the hand plane, and then I just went back and smoothed it up a little bit with a file. It needs some more work, but you can see it's starting to round over. It's rounded around the corner and over the top, so it doesn't dig into your hand when you're using it, as compared to this other corner that's still, you know, completely sharp with no rounding over. So we'll try to get everything to look a little bit like this.
It was Georgia pine, I needed to work. I didn't care what kind. My trouble starts when the whistle blows.
Well, I went ahead and drilled the hole and made the ebony strike button and got it glued in. And you might be able to see a little bit of dampness on the outside here. I wiped everything down with odorless thinner to get it cleaned up before I put the finish on it. Again, the finish will be the same thing I use on my bench. It worked really well on the last plane. It's 1/3 alkyd varnish, 1/3 boiled linseed oil, and 1/3 odorless thinner. It gives a little bit of a film finish, but it also gives a little bit of oil penetration. It's got a satin sheen to it rather than a high gloss varnish, so it just has a nice look to it. I won't put any finish inside the abutment or on the bed where the this out of the way, where the blade will seat, but I will put it on all the other visible areas. It really brings out the color in the wood. It's nice. And as usual, I won't put any finish on the sole. That it gets sanded off anytime you flatten the sole, and I like to put paraffin on the sole anyway and rub it in real hard and work it in as best I can, because it really makes the plane work well, and it kind of protects it like a finish. And when it sands off, it's no big deal. You just rub some more paraffin on it and you're back in business. Alright, well that does it for the first coat of finish. Well, I finished the plane, and I've got 3 coats of finish on it, and I've wiped it down and steel wooled it a little bit to get an even sheen on it. It's a real low gloss. I really like the way it looks, but more important than that is how does it work. And I've got it tuned up now, and I got a piece of hard maple here. So I'm going to zoom the camera in a little bit and let you see.
We're down in a hole. Well, tons of gold on a big iron sled. I work all day for a cold hard bed. Now heaven knows where heaven lies. There ain't no gold in a Tennessee mine.
shavings aren't what's important really, it's the wood, and it is just glass smooth. The plane just works really well. It's got a really tight mouth opening, so it takes a little bit of trial and error to get the blade set just right, because you don't want hardly any blade protruding. If either one of the corners is actually cutting, then it's a little too deep, and you're talking about a 2/1000 adjustment there. So it takes just a little bit of work to get it right on the money.
Everything I own, now when I die, my grave will fill with the Tennessee miner from the Georgia hills. 12 tons of gold on a big iron sled.